So, Mani, what next?
Yeah, just about starting in a minute. Some more people just transiting in from the waiting room, so we're giving them that 30 seconds.
Go ahead, take your time.
Good evening, everybody. Professor Mani, welcoming you on behalf of Bombay Management Association to our annual HR Convention 2020. I welcome the new participants who have joined us today and like to share with you that this journey of the HR Convention was planned in the month of March, and then COVID struck, as all of us know. However, our dynamic program director, Yogi Sriram, decided that we should still take this program for the benefit of all our members and the HR fraternity. And that's how BMA got working with him enthusiastically. And we have been delivering this program over many Saturdays now, starting August 15th. We still have 2 more Saturdays to go to complete the entire band of discussions that we had themed on HR raising a toast. Or is it the other way around? Business raising a toast to HR. Because we're always used to saying that HR is fit enough to be a business partner. Does HR have a role in the boardroom? And after all these discussions, Yogi decided, let's spin the top the other way around. Thank you so much to all our participants who've been coming week after week and giving us a positive reinforcement that the entire module has been indeed very useful. BMA is very grateful to Rituparna Chakraborty and Ashok Ramchandran, both of them leaders in the human resource space, representing leading organizations in the service segment and of course, the manufacturing segment. More about them, I'm sure you've read about before you even came to this session, but I let Yogi to do the honors. It's my pleasant duty to once again welcome Yogi Sriram, our program director for the HR convention. An HR person who perhaps has touched so many lives of HR professionals over the last 4 decades that he has been in industry. Continues to be the advisor to the chairman and managing director and CEO at Larsen & Toubro, a regular visiting faculty at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which is his alma mater, sits on the boards of several educational institutions and national networks and associations, including IMA, National HRD Network, National Institute of Personnel Management, Indian Society for Training and Development, and so on. Indeed, a blessing to have Yogi Sriram with us as our program director. May I hand over to him to begin the proceedings today.
Thanks, Mani, thanks a lot. You added some feathers to my cap, which I don't deserve, because I was the president of NHRD in Mumbai chapter, but not anymore. But thanks a lot. The rest of it is true. And I'm on several boards, including on ITM, which is a great pleasure. This afternoon, this is the seventh in a series of 9 sessions. This afternoon, we're going to be hearing and listening and speaking to speakers on the subject of leadership, new models of leadership, especially servant leadership, which has fascinated me, and I have an interest in hearing them on that subject, and also any other new models that fit the spirit of the times or the zeitgeist. And also, I'm sure that they're going to talk about followership and so on. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Rituparna first. Rituparna Chakraborty is the co-founder and executive vice president, Team Lease Services Ltd. She is an accomplished business leader with multifaceted experience and a passion for excellence and a proven ability to drive growth at scale. She has a business experience of 21 years and as co-founder and EVP of Team Lease, she has been instrumental in making Team Lease India's largest people supply chain company. She leads Team Lease's staffing business. She also spearheads India's first PPP apprentice program, National Employability Through Apprentice Program called NETAP, which is a transformative initiative to solve India's employability problem. She is the only person from Asia to be included in the Global Power 100 and International 50 Women in Staffing and is the winner of the Telstra Businesswoman in Asia Award. She also has won the Femina Super Achievers Award 2018. She was conferred Distinguished Alumnus Award at the 10th Indian Management Conclave 2019. I won't go through her entire CV, which is extremely distinguished. She's an economics graduate from Banaras Hindu University and an MBA from Goa Institute of Management. But a very prolific speaker, great thinker, and I'm sure you will enjoy listening to her. Ashok Ramchandran is the Group Executive President and the Group Human Resources at the Aditya Birla Group. In his role, he oversees a portfolio consisting of a set of businesses across the conglomerate with 7 CHROs reporting to him, as well as the group centers of expertise of learning and talent development, talent staffing, and employee relations. He also oversees the group's initiatives of running 62 unit schools across the country. Ashok carries over 31 years of rich and varied experience in HR, spanning multiple sectors in companies such as Asian Paints, GE Capital, Tata AIG Insurance, and Vodafone India, prior to joining ABG in Group HR in October 15. He's also moved across roles in IR and HR, as well as heading factory operations in Ankleshwar, Gujarat with Asian Paints. He's a very seasoned HR professional and currently holds the portfolio of Secretary of the NHRDN Board and a very well-known person who speaks in a number of seminars and so on. So welcome to both of you. Let me start by talking about something which is spoken about in every seminar, but I'll approach it from a different angle. I think what we're facing today is what Nassim Taleb calls a black swan event. And the meaning of a black swan event is it is highly improbable in our minds. It's probably unimaginable. And it lies outside the realm of our regular expectations. It's something just wacky, just happens. And it has an extreme impact on all of us. And human nature is to concoct. And of course, we have lots of people who are, kind of makeshift COVID doctors. Human nature is to make us concoct explanations for its occurrence. And we all try to explain about why it has happened and to almost make it predictable. This is the SARS COVID-19 which has happened and which has left us all out of gear. So I will move from that thought of what a black swan event is to the concept of anti-fragile, which is spoken about by the same person. And anti-fragile is beyond resilience, it's beyond robustness. It is that Greek story of the Hydra, where you cut off one head and it grows 2 heads. In other words, when there is something which is happening, which is extremely adverse, instead of just withstanding the shock, in anti-fragile, you come back with a great resilience plus. And resilience plus means you actually come back even better than before. So this is what I guess the pandemic is teaching us all, a combination of black swan and anti-fragile. And I'd like to start by asking each one of you to please give us your perspective of what are the shifts you see in leadership styles and what you see as staying, what you see as working, what you see as different as compared to normal times, and how that anti-fragile concept is getting unleashed, if it is. I'd love to hear both of you. Anyone can start.
Ritu, you want to go first or shall I?
Yeah, Ashok,
Okay.
please you.
We'll go by alphabetical order, Ashok.
Okay, I was going to say let's go by Delhi first, but okay, Mumbai then. Okay, so good evening everybody and a warm welcome. And at the outset, let me thank Yogi Sriram and Professor Mani for hosting an event which is, it shows resilience on their side. to have hosted it in this format, when we should have assembled in one room, all of us huddled together. When that can't happen, most people expect these events to get called off. And the fact that they quickly thought on their feet, changed the format, and the spirit of learning was to continue. And they came into this format. So thank you to both of you for hosting us, for inviting us, and for doing this event. And to each of you, thank you for your presence and time today. Let's have a lovely conversation. It's less about a massive Gyan session, more about conversation, because I think across the table, we all have our experiences, and I'm sure there's lots to share. And therefore, let's keep the conversation and Q&A going. What I thought I'll do is I'll just share two parts in the initial remarks, which might be of relevance. One is I'll share what I sense and what I read, what my group experiences as tones of the organization, the business environment which is changing. What does it mean to us? Because leadership has to be baked in the context of this change.
Yeah.
What I thought I'll do is I'll just picture that change a little bit. Some of it will already be known. Some of it is a nuance I thought I'll share. And then I'll spend a few minutes on what I believe are 5 leadership imperatives which are clearly coming through at senior levels, middle levels. And that part would be across all companies, literally. I think, first of all, in this change with the economy going through, even pre-COVID, there's been turbulence across the economic environment, and it's less to say COVID alone, but it's also been economic turbulence. There's been protectionism, social changes have been happening. Societies are demanding more results from employers and organizations. And entire economies have become closed door in many ways. So what constitutes global trade, what constitutes protectionism, what constitutes demand is all fast undergoing changes. Technology is the other massive change, which is impacting customer demands and so on. And then comes COVID at the top of all this, and the political uncertainty, economic fragility, and protectionism. Society changes, community demands have changed. So as a business, we operate in multiple countries, and we see the headwinds on some of these issues. Calling it headwinds sometimes sounds wrong, because these are natural changes to the way fabric of countries and economies will work. And we need to, as corporates, learn to manage that. We need to, as even organization, you could be not-for-profit, you could also be an education institution, and you're going to be buffeted by the same storms. So first thing we see big change happening is the customer orientation, a sharpened customer orientation. So redefinition of customers, B2B, B2C. Many of our customers have simply gone out because the B2B to C customer has changed. Therefore, my B2B customer has changed. So demand and customer orientation has drastically changed. I could talk about, let's say, Aditya Birla Fashion Retail, which is one of our listed businesses. None of us today are going out to shops and malls, in the absence of which you're not thinking formal clothes anymore today. How do we therefore have a business model where the architecture of the whole model as a customer has changed? You may not be buying cars today, or you may choose to buy a car for your safety today because you don't want public transport. So tectonic shifts are happening in customer orientation and demand, and that's going to change the way we will even think. And I believe as leaders, as HR people, business leaders, academic leaders, we have to think through these tones so that we're better prepared for it. The second big change, which has never been more intense than now, is, and this goes beyond the CFO to all of us, which is all about cash, working capital management, costs, and supply chain. I think this has really hit us on the face. No more the liberties of managing spends. It's very tight. Businesses are having existential choices to make. How do you expand? Do I expand capacity when I'm not sure where the capacity will be needed at all? What if I expand and demand rise up? These are questions which are really assailing the decision makers. Of course, the third bucket would be a word which all of us have to say something about, whether we fully know it or not, and I share my level of ignorance as well, is the whole world of digitalization. Everybody, every forum's got to say something. Every organization has to look brave and do something about it. But I think the word is coming alive. Right from digital adoption to I would rather come across and meet you, to today we never even think of meeting. So even forums have changed. Supply chain, factories have become more smart within quotes, and therefore digitalization is here to stay, and that will have its impact on productivity. And therefore the fourth bucket is really coming up for the HR mind specifically, into org design, productivity, workforce planning. What does it mean to the future? So I think between academia and industry, there's a lot of work to be catalyzed and being catalyzed around what's the future of organizations. How do we architect? Workforce of the past may not happen now. How do I work smarter, more better? How do I adopt better technologies? And what does it mean to employment? What does it mean to the economy? I think these are coming up in the leader's mind. And you will have enough examples across industry where we have factories which are producing 2 times that revenue or volume of output of a particular nature, let's say metals, aluminum, with about maybe 15% of the workforce of my legacy factory. So as a leader, I have a choice to make as to what do I do with the legacy factory? How do I convert it to smart? How do I bring in technology, digitalization, reskilling? The reskilling mission in India and in companies is going to be a big picture need. So how do we get a grip around that? And yet, I can't delay that too much. The time value T has come in. The denominator has become very critical. Whatever I do, if I don't do fast enough, I'll be wiped out. So I need to respond, else I'll be out of business. So I think that is coming up as a massive priority. And of course, the whole conundrum of COVID, which has thrown us into a complexity between, do I be result oriented or am I empathetic as an organization? Should I be sharply focused on productivity, resizing and so on? Or do I need to recognize that health, welfare, reskilling, care for people, empathy for people beyond the normal responsiveness of health and so on? How do I take care? You can't just ask people to be jettisoned outside in a time when they can't find another job. So how does one do when industry is contracting? How do I manage workforce productivity with empathy? I think this is a conundrum which is coming across to all of us. You got to do both, but how does one do both? I think those are dilemmas. So it's now spawning therefore 5 leadership challenges, Yogi, which I thought I'll quickly reflect on. If I'd say that, I mean, the business environment will have more complexities, I'm sure, but those are 6 complexities we face on the headwind side, and we are working our way through that. And this is calling upon 5 things from leaders. And it could be any number, but I've picked 5 which I believe I am convincing strongly. How do leaders deal with ambiguity? How do leaders deal with ambiguity? And ambiguity of decision making, ambiguity of managing contradictions, of taking decisions in a time where you don't know where your decision will head. Even if you're the most seasoned of leaders, you feel a little out of sorts today. Because all of us have grown up in a diet of doing well. And suddenly you're coming to a situation where you don't know what the next meal is going to come from, who's your next customer. So how does my leader cope with ambiguity? Back of the mind, people want to know whether my leader knows the job. Is my job secure? Is my belief in my leader valid? People asking these questions. It's not just enough to be empathetic. Does he know how to change the business model? So leadership is being asked to redefine itself. What is the courage? The element of courage is the second point. People are having to have the courage. It's very easy to be dithering and taking the middle path of saying, yeah, thoda adjust, thoda this, thoda that, change a little bit and move on. But what are the big, bold calls that I don't have a choice but to take? And I think we are called upon to check those calls. And I think that's a journey we have to build into leaders to say, how do you at one level do pilots and take risks, and innovation is important. And yet the tolerance for failure is going down. Because if I innovate and fail twice, what does it mean to me? How do I recover and stumble and get up? So third point really is resilience that Yogi spoke about, which is anti-fragility, which is really, do I have the resilience as an organization to pilot and come out? As a leader to evoke the best of my middle and junior teams to bring in great ideas and be resilient about myself. Most important quality which we are struggling with, and sometimes particularly senior people, is authenticity sometimes and learning agility. It's a theoretical construct. It's there and part of competency frameworks and mindsets and attitude. But how do I get my leaders to be agile, learning agile? How do I say I'm vulnerable to learning? Or is it because somebody becomes senior, he becomes more, what I call is the hard shell of success, holds you very tight, that I don't want to learn, I'm so good, I'm so successful. But how do I change the tone to become vulnerable to learning? And that authenticity, people want to know. Am I the only junior guy who has to learn? Can my leader also depict learning? I think that's coming up. And the fifth attribute we are experiencing is there cannot be a more intense time for leaders to learn, to depict how to co-create and collaborate. It's no more my individual brilliance which will carry, no more my past success which will carry. I need to learn how to co-create with people whom I didn't expect to co-create with. Some of my trainees bring out the best of the idea of the context. So how do I unleash that creativity and co-create and have the humility to collaborate and hold my ego back when I believe I know what to do for the company? I think these are 5 trends I see, Professor Mani and Yogi and team, all of us, as I depict this part. So let me climb up there. I just wanted to share those trend lines and the impact on leadership. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I think thanks so much, first and foremost, Mr. Sriram, Professor Mani, and as well as Ashok, because I first and foremost don't know whether I'm worthy of being in this forum talking about the subject. I feel that I'm still work in progress as a leader. Yes, I do have a responsibility of running an organization and a large team. And let me try and share my perspective of what I probably am going through personally and how I have dealt with the current situation. Maybe because I don't think I would be able to give a roadmap which is essentially going to be a replica of what leaders across all organizations or various organizations, irrespective of background, should be doing. But I think few aspects which I thought probably which would help as some kind of basic guidelines which probably we could pay attention to. One of the things which has been clear to me that COVID has essentially not created too many new trends. COVID has essentially exponentially exposed or expedited trends which we were already seeing in our environment. And from that perspective, I think the way I have approached is just to give you all a background that we work with 67 industries as a company. We have our associate employees based across 6,600 locations. Suddenly we were faced with a situation where we had to differentiate our employee base across who works in essential services and who doesn't work in essential services. Which means that the way earlier when we used to organize ourselves across industries, profiles, years of experience, compensation, suddenly we had to quickly change our perspective of managing this large deployed workforce across who is in which sector, who is in essential services and who is not in essential services, who is working on field, who is working from home, or who is at home but not working. I think, and hence how do you plan ahead? So whether there is pandemic or not, I think we all realize as a listed company, my shareholders still hold me to certain standards. I don't think we will get any brownie points or rather any leeways just because there is a pandemic. So I guess from the outside world's perspective, I'm still evaluated on growth. I'm still evaluated on margin expansion, and I'm still evaluated on capital frugality. And hence, in spite of the chaos which is going around, how as a leader, how can I navigate the organization towards all of this? I think the first test was for me as a leader was how flexible was I to react to the current situation, and hence, and how much time as an organization we took to react to the current situation. So because I felt that my response essentially is going to actually trickle down to how every employee within the organization reacts to the pandemic. I think around the month of, around the first week of March, I think when we were not still looking at a lockdown, we were still picking up news and cues about there's something called the virus, and then it is attacking most countries. And while it's still not here, but it's likely to be here I think the way the communication with customers began, because for us, the biggest lever or the biggest dependency is how do we manage our customers and their apprehensions, because we are working with 67 different kinds of organizations or sectors. So the first reaction point was, how do we now first reach out to our customers and talk to them and understand where they stand? Are there steps and measures with which we can proactively solve some of the problems that they're dealing with? Can we proactively plan how they're going to manage the large associate base and workforce? Are there data points and informations which can be shared with them in advance for them to be able to make qualified decisions? In some cases, we felt actually that the customers were probably not also ready at their end to deal with the pandemic, and our proactive reach out helped them plan how they're going to react or what are the do's and don'ts that they should be doing, because this is not just about business and money. This is a matter of a lot of lives which are out there who are vulnerable at that point of time. So I think the first reaction, and that's why I agree with what Ashok started with. So the first point of starting was, how do I engage and collaborate with my customer base? What role I play with my customers to kind of deal with that. And I think personally as a leader, I remember that I traveled till about the 20th of March. As a rule, I travel Mondays and Tuesdays. I think even those 3 weeks of March, every conversations and meetings that we have done with customers, which were physical, by the way, were around preparedness for COVID. And subsequently, I think when we moved to a completely digital environment, our communications with customers and engagement increased manifold, because nobody knew what's going to happen, and hence that amount of hand-holding was required. I think second aspect was the preparedness of the organization to handle crisis. I think we have never ever worked from home. So 100% of our business operations happened till about 5 months, 6 months back from physical premises. While we were digitally native, we had already gone onto a cloud environment. Most of our systems can operate without physical, but we somehow continued to work from offices, and hence, because I think there was an inherent belief, and I still believe corporate India has that belief, that when people are working from offices, that's when they are productive. And it's a huge shift. It's a huge change management process. But I think the immediate reaction that we had in terms of ensuring that employees are safe, that employees are working from home, that all the systems and tools are immediately put in place to be able to work. And thereon, how do we address the challenge of productivity? So as a leader, it's very easy for us to kind of live in a present continuous state, where you're saying that this is how we used to operate before, and let's follow the same rhythm and same timetables or same schedule, even in a work from home kind of a environment. But I think we were forced to make changes. And I think if I cannot expect my team members to make changes if I were not willing to make those changes. So as a leader, you have to be at the forefront of the entire change management process. So any change that I was expecting from my employees or my team members, I had to first demonstrate that behavior so that they could replicate the same. I think the amount of empathy, the amount of collaboration which ensued, wherein we started to keep in mind and consider that the employees' concerns, challenges were put into the policy making or decision making process, went a long way. As a matter of fact, because almost 80,000 or 90,000 of our employee base was working through the pandemic, our systems could not fail. And hence, every team were on their toes at any point of time. Everyone had to work round the clock to ensure that there is an element of cushion and there is an element of comfort, assurance, and reliability that we could give to each and every of these associates. Like the people who are working on e-commerce segment, the people who are working on logistics, the people who are working on essential services, retail, for example, the DMarts of the world. I think they were in tenterhooks, but how do you handle at that point of time that entire process where the team is backing up these large number of employees on ground was an important element. How do you leverage technology? The third element. I think we all talk a lot about technology, but how much do we end up using technology in our day-to-day life? I think when the process of onboarding, for example, before COVID, we realized that while we had all the tools in place, only about not more than 25% of my customers or my associates used to use that opportunity, the tool of onboarding, the online digital tool of onboarding. And we were able to, over I think less than a week's time, almost 95–96% adoption of digital tools happened. That happened through a series of communication and enabling conversations with internal teams, customers, associates. So digitalization, of course, was another important one. The fourth thing, which essentially we were able to do, is we realized that in this new environment, we all have to pick up new skills. We all have to invest in learning stuff which we probably were not acclimatized to doing. Before, again, we could get the teams, get the employees within the organizations to do that. It's again important for leaders to demonstrate that, yes, this works. So personally, for me, I enrolled myself into 3 long certification. I mean, these are not those 1 week or courses around. First, one of the things that I actually decided to pick up was, which again, Mr. Sriram had told me that everyone should be doing in one of our conferences about a year back. I enrolled myself into a coding essential course, which was to pick up Python. I've still not completed it, but I cannot expect, I think we all talk about skillings and we all talk about that everybody in the organization should be going through upgradation problem, but I don't think we'll be able to get them to do it until we as leaders demonstrate the same thing. So I picked up one on coding, I picked up one on digital marketing, and I picked up one on the evolution of cryptocurrency. Essentially to showcase to the team, I mean, that if I can, or I feel the need to learn, I'm sure you can also do the same. And I think that was another thing which we were able to get people to get acclimatized to, beyond just saying that everybody should be skilling. Another realization I had was that for example, we have been talking about how org structures should be evolving. I think we all have traditional org structures where there is a leader, and then there are these growth functions, and then there are enabling functions, and then there are support functions. I think one of the things which we thought we need to challenge is that, is it necessary for us to be wedded to these boundaries or boxes which we call as our job roles? Is there a possibility for us to actually look at it, make use of this opportunity and move away from the siloed structure of working towards collaborative, project-oriented work groups? So I can tell you that 3 layers in the organization from the top actually got merged into one group, and we divided ourselves into project working groups rather than say, this is finance, this is sales, this is client servicing, or this is marketing, so on and so forth. And these groups were also having the same, had the common goal of how do we enable growth in spite of the current situation? How do we look at maintaining capital frugality even through the difficult times? And how do we ensure that there is margin expansion happening? And I think that really resonated well with everybody within the organization and gave us some good dividends. Then I think the four things which I thought were the future of our organization, and we've been talking a lot about it, and we've been deliberating that this is how the organization should be, and this is pre-COVID I'm talking about, that how should our business ecosystems change? How should we look at talent or human resources? What are the imperatives from a legal and a policy making perspective? And of course, the technology and innovation part of it. And I think COVID made us confront some of this stuff, which were just like drawing board conversations so far. So how should we reach out to customers, for example? I think we were all used to having large sales forces out there who will be reaching out to customers. But now that there is a COVID environment, there is business opportunities. Is there going to be a different strategy of reaching out to our customers, for example? From a people perspective, I mean, which are the areas where, what kind of profiles do I right now need? So I do still need salespeople, but do I need different skill set in these salespeople? Should the future salespeople have different skill sets? Should they be digitally be native? Should they, is their style of working consultative rather than being prescriptive in nature? What kind of educational qualifications should they come from? Also, how am I going to upscale and upskill the organization, the current organization? Because from an outside world's perspective, I have to derive increased productivity from existing resources. Do I have the necessary tools, systems? Am I spending enough time in questioning internal processes to be able to derive higher productivity? What are the regulatory changes that are required for us to be able to ahead? Are there still challenges in ease of doing businesses? Are there, especially for the staffing environment, are there still issues in terms of the way the regulations currently are? There is a new googly in the form of trying to regulate the gig economies, and hence what are the rules that we should proactively envisage? Like we have the 4 labor codes which have been notified. We are already trying to create proactively, leaving aside the wage code, for all the 3 codes, what are the kind of rules that we wish to be? Based on whatever text we have seen in the labor codes, are there concerns which we can mitigate by having a very detailed rule-making process, and can we help the government in that area as well? Also, resource talent pipeline is itself, like we are seeing that south and west of the country, as I speak, there is higher demand for manpower, while the available supply is in the north and the east of the country. And hence, is there a role where we could work together with the governments of the respective state to help the matching process happen better, and through a digital environment? And of course, what are the ways and means by which I could invest futuristically for technology which is paperless, which is touchless, which is presenceless? Is it possible? Are there still opportunities where there are certain existing processes where we are still dependent on maintaining physical records? Can that be done away with? Because that's essentially, the writing is pretty clear in terms of how the future would be. So I think for me as a leader, I have been approaching my role from analyzing my role across these functions. And also, I think what personal realization is that leadership is no more about I. It's not about what I can do. Essentially, what our role is to ensure that what we can do together as a team, and am I empowering my team enough to be able to make the right choices and decisions? And rather than trying to become actually a tumbling block in terms of the progress, my role, has it shifted from being directional in the current environment to facilitating and creating a collaborative culture? And thirdly, yes, there are certain capabilities a leader brings. Am I utilizing those capabilities to removing any kinds of blocks that are currently in the environment, currently amongst teams, which are acting as bottlenecks for them to go forward? And am I playing an adequate role to kind of taking care and overcoming those blocks? I feel if as a leader, I'm able to, I think I'm still work in progress. I'm able to do some of these. I might be actually leading the organization towards the kind of goals that we envisage for ourselves. So that's a practitioner's perspective. And now over to you, Mr. Sriram.
That was terrific. Both Ritu and Ashok put customer at the center. You gave your perspectives about your respective organizations. And thank you for a great start. I'd like to now take the question to another dimension. The question of what kind of a leadership model makes sense in current times. And I'd like to be much more specific, since we have mentioned to the audience in our brochure and made an announcement about servant leadership. I'd like to kind of zero into that. The 21st century has seen a rocketing interest in many leadership theories and leadership styles. What I read in my Tata Institute of Social Sciences program was more about 20th century leadership models like Feidler and Porter-Laurer and so on, but not so much of the 21st, because firstly I wasn't there at that time in the 21st, and when I get into the 21st, I don't find there too many of the 21st which one can talk about. Even the servant leadership model that we're about to embark upon is almost 30 years old. It's not new. And the assumption in the servant leadership model is that engagement of people depends a lot on the leader. And the emphasis moves from the so-called macho transformation leader to a leader who is more interested in the follower, the needs of the follower, the explicit and the implicit needs of the follower. And the idea of service is embedded in what the leader does. So therefore, the leader-follower relationship is very different from when the person is leading an organization in the transformational style, where you cut people and where you of course do all kinds of things which probably the shareholder expects you to do, but is not exactly very favorable to the follower. So I want to now come into specifically the examples of servant leadership, and there are 8 dimensions according to the gurus of servant leadership. But empowerment, let's start with empowerment. What is your own experience with leaders who are in times like this empowering followers in the context of work from home? Are they trusting followers? Are they saying that they need to fill up timesheets and logbooks and stuff like that? Or are they saying that we trust you and you can do what you like? You don't have to record attendance. How is it working? And Ashok, maybe you can start.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fantastic question and a context that you pictured, Yogi, which is, I think today leaders are clearly, I would say there is a leadership transition happening. I don't think we have fully moved to empowerment or trusteeship or a followership approach. I see people, there is a generational shift which is happening. I suspect any generation would have 2 generations or 3 generations in the workforce, but it's very pronounced now. At one level, you have very successful senior experienced leaders who have grown up in a hierarchical sense, giving orders, instructions, and changes. And you have the very quick arrival of the unprepared, who are the young Turks who are wanting more freedom, wanting more empowerment, wanting more release of their energies, creative thoughts, who have a better perspective of technology, better perspective of even solution. And in many ways, they're also coming across as very aware of what's happening in the outside world. And therefore, from the fuzzy thing called perspective, they seem to carry a fairly refined perspective of what needs to be done in a given situation, be it a strategic issue or be it an operational issue. Importantly, they are also willing to back it up with drive and the passion to deliver on what their path forward is. Why do I say this? I say this because this is the bedrock on which followership is built on. So in some sense, the context seems to propel who takes the leadership ahead. I've had situations where I've seen many of the middle managers who classically would have been executors, would have taken on the senior leader's instruction and got things done, today take charge. And the senior leaders, wherever we have an enlightened one at that, in some corners, and some corners we have people who are yet to become enlightened. And typically an organization would be a mix of both. The enlightened side of the organization says, can I simply allow such people who are clearly better than me in that context and back them up with my ability to take risk and the backing of the organization? The leader then becomes the follower, and the leadership mantle moves to the middle management or even the trainee in some context. I've had situations where entire re-architecturing of parts of the business strategy, even HR processes at a group level, have got architected by some of us simply stepping back and saying, that's a great idea. Now, this is not about being cute about it and saying, why don't you give me a view, that's a good idea kind of a tone. It's like actually empowering the decision making to be done at a level way below the so-called pyramidal hierarchy. But the bedrock is the level of preparation. The level of preparation goes much before that level of decision making, which becomes a symbol of followership. It becomes a symbol of allowing plural decision making. The bedrock comes from allowing people, because if you're suddenly asking me to be very open and challenging and willing to come differently, if you haven't created the bedrock or thinking or the platform for it, I won't suddenly become that on the day when I have to be that. So early on, how organizations encourage different thinking, challenges, what has got us here may not get us there, willingness to look at new thinking and new ideas, willingness to display in action the notion of humility. Because now these topics, some of these qualities are very inherent to the very fabric and the bed on which followership will rest. And its execution comes pre that phase, Yogi. And I've seen wherever we've invested deeply, those opportunities come alive. Importantly, the fuel for that comes when the drive for that comes not from hierarchical growth from the youngsters. It comes from the spirit of participation. The wellspring of coming up and saying, I will take on the leadership role in a sticky situation comes from the willingness to experiment, willingness to participate, willingness to contribute. And if I'm stuck in a hierarchical world, I'm not going to allow that to happen because it threatens my very existence of the power structure. So we are working with a lot of leaders to say, can you not be so uptight about your position as leaders and allow this trusteeship, allow this followership, step back and be part of a project team. If required, if you can't, step away maybe and give the reins of the decision making to somebody. So these are experiments, I would say, which start as preparation of the bedrock and allow people to harness these opportunities. And quite often I'm amazed by the results. Thrilled to see so many people come up with so many solutions, which I think as a group of senior people, we would have been wrong to hold on to. So when done well, the humility is a treat. When not done well, the seniority is a pain.
Well said. And Ritu, accountability is the other companion which goes with empowerment. It's holding people accountable for performance that they can control, because they have to draw their circle of influence, their circle of control, and see what they can really impact. It's a very powerful tool because it shows confidence on what your followers can do. It can also be a tool which is, expressing a certain degree of, are you doing what you should be doing? A little bit of policing and stuff. But ultimately, accountability is very important, even in followership that is underscored by servant leadership, because it makes the boundaries of how you can function, what you're supposed to do, your outcomes, and so on. So how does one balance, in your view, the equation of not micromanaging too much, and at the same time having the checks and balances for proper accountability? Any instances?
Sure. I think in this context, something which I at least remind myself and my team is that when it comes to accountability, you cannot have anything which is outside your job description, because what happens is that when a team is when the team is aligned towards a common goal, and I think at that point of time, which is I think a common tendency of holding some other function or some other external factor as a reason why you could not deliver your own set of tasks is quite common. I think we all. So I think my approach towards creating accountability is that while all of us, each of us, have our respective responsibilities, domain, specialization, but we are all accountable to our goals, and we all should acknowledge that we alone cannot reach those goals, which means that our goals is a function of things which we ourselves control and things which are outside of our control. And hence, while the things which are in our control, I better have a grip over it and I better deliver to it. So there is no question about it. But we also have to learn to take responsibility of influencing those in our environment who actually have a role to play in our reaching our goals. So if, for example, I'll give you a classic example. So if I go and tell my shareholders, for example, or my outside world or whoever, I mean, this organization, I mean, I'm running an organization finally, that sorry, I cannot grow because the government of India's regulations are not changing or taking too long. Honestly, I'm sorry to be as blunt as saying, who cares? It is essentially my accountability, and it is my job to influence my environment to kind of rally along to meet our objectives. And that to me is accountability. That I mean, for example, a salesperson, like when a salesperson cannot come and give me reasons about how a certain industry is behaving and why that is the reason for them not reaching their goals, right? And I feel my idea of accountability is that when it comes to getting a work done, you should not assume anything which is outside your job description. And that aligns very much with the previous point of empowerment. If I am saying that nothing is above your job description, I also in the same breath should be telling my team that you're empowered to question other teams or any decisions within the organizations which you think has the potential for you to get to your goals. So that's how I combine empowerment and accountability.
Thanks. And for Ashok, I want to club together 3 points of servant leadership. One is standing back, which means that you look at the interest of your followers first. You allow them to soak up the credit. You retreat into the background after showing them the way. So it's all about pointing your followers in the right direction and then stepping away. Humility, which you talked about, Ashok, is something that we know. It's I mean, something that we understand in the sense that it arises from a good understanding of what is our own strengths and weaknesses and admitting them. And the third is authenticity. Authenticity is being yourself and being your true version, and also expressing your inner thoughts and inner feelings to your followers, even if it means you're looking a little vulnerable. I'd love to hear your comments on these 3 points: standing back, humility, and authenticity, in particularly today's time for leadership credibility.
Yeah, I think it's the core of leadership. Fantastic capture you did, Yogi, there. And I think it just stimulates so much of the thought for where we are. I think the element of, I think I've seen every leader go through that initial phase of how do I do this? To a point of seeing the joy of doing this. And what happens in the transition is there is a certain personal motive that all of us carry, a certain personal drive that each of us carry to the role every day, whichever organization we go to.
Yeah.
I think if the definition of success of the day, of the week, of the month, of a phase in the career is changed to allow the celebration of joy of seeing somebody else do it for you, you are able to step back better. And I've seen the element of self-confidence play a big role. I think wherever leaders are a bit uneasy, wherever the environment propels the need for leaders to depict their glory themselves, I've seen people try and not be so willing to allow stepping back to happen. And therefore, the environment has a role to play. The individual motive has a role to play. So if I'm secure within my skin of what I'm trying to achieve in the company, and I don't have to, within quotes, prove myself every day. Of course, there is an element of performance assessment. All of us go through that.
Yeah.
We have evidence, delivery, and so on. I'm saying beyond that, when you transcend that boundary, we have seen the best of coaches come through from the line managers. We believe coaching is a huge science and an art in itself.
Yeah.
But the best of line managers carry that element of joy in seeing somebody do well. And I think it's a very odd thing. We are quite often very comfortable seeing the very young trainee do well. As the hierarchical levels come closer to each other, we become more difficult to be open and step back. So this is a twist in the tail to what you said. I'm very authentic as far as all my trainees are concerned. But why do I become less authentic, less comfortable, less prone to holding tighter as the hierarchy comes a little closer to where you are? It seems to come from the fact that there's a magnanimity to the role that we carry, but equally we must carry the best of leaders have been able to empower their DRs and one level below as much as they sound very good to the trainees. And this is a nuance we are finding, Yogi, now, because we're finding that why are people fantastic? The trainees give us fantastic feedback. And yes, the same person is uncomfortable with the so-called near peer group coming very close to the space. So apparently there is a leadership space. And if people are willing to break that shell of leadership space, you allow people to come in and out. And I think the last learning on this I would share is that companies must allow this to happen. Companies must celebrate it. What is celebrated and recognized is reinforced. And I think if companies recognize leaders as being pluralistic, willing to step back, authentic, that I do it even when I'm not being asked to do so, and that development of my next level and empowering of my next level is part of my core, we do that. In our succession planning discussions, Yogi, we discussed this, and I'm sure you do that for L&T as well. You built a fantastic brand in L&T for growth of people within, and that was going to be a question I was going to put into the box for you to answer as well, to pick your mind on the fact that, you know, when we look at succession plan, we quite often look at 2-3 people very close to the goal post. And yet only one person is going to be given the key. We did a model of what is called the 70% fitness to a role. You know, we normally say if it's 70% fit, give the guy the key, let him run with the role. We found that quite often it's not the functional expertise, it's not the knowledge of the context, but it's the third bucket of followership, empowerment. Has he built enough leaders? Has he or she delivered on the succession plan while in the current role? We are starting to pull that as the main plug, which will distinguish me from A or B or C. And either I get it or don't get it on that basis. So we are actually putting accountability to what you're saying. So it's no more a model of functioning. It's actually getting executed by leadership choices. I think that seems to be quite helpful in messaging out to people, apart from the what is called employee satisfaction surveys, manager scorecards, and so on. So nobody can hide. You can't be falsely humble. It's a reputation. It's a smell or a stink. One of it will happen. You can't coast through the room without smelling or stinking. I think that's the reputation of empowerment and authenticity. It's a smell of authenticity.
And before I come on to trying to answer your question, Ashok, on what L&T does, I thought I'll round off this discussion because a little digital bird told me that Mani's chat box is bursting with questions. And I'd like to just round off by asking Rituparna about the last two characteristics of servant leadership. One is courage and the other is stewardship. Courage is all about how you stand up to take on organizational orthodoxies, how you challenge the status quo, how you're also able to support your followers to go through the churn. And stewardship is putting the organization before yourself, putting the department before you. Is a little bit of a opposite of what I read when I read The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand when I was growing up in Sri Ram College of Commerce through my graduation. Stewardship is a very important leadership characteristic, which, by the way, we also look at in L&T. It's called organizational stewardship. So any comments on how this entire 6 months and before, Ritu, you've seen, has it helped in fostering it? Are you seeing evidence of this becoming more and more important for leadership success? Any views on that? And then we will, a short little something from me, and then we'll go into questions.
Absolutely. I think, again, I think I'll talk experientially. In the year 2004, I think as a company, TeamLease picked up the baton, if I may say, in terms of seeking labor reform. And I think our tonality, we turned on the volume, and at that point of time, a lot of people said, are you guys crazy that you guys are taking on the government like this? You're essentially conflicting with them. Is it going to be good for your business? We were just starting out as a company. I mean, we started out in 2002, and hence labor reform is never going to happen. I think I remember many futile initiative from your part, and I think it's going to be disastrous for the organization, for the future of the organization. And hence it is probably, and so we did have that backlash from people internally. We've got that, we got that feedback from our well-wishers that look at others, nobody else is doing it in this space, in this industry, or even outside. And hence, why are you guys being so vocal about it? And what is the being? I think we were very clear that in order to bring about change, we had to make this choice. And at that point, we had to be bold, we had to be courageous. Because if our vision is putting India to work, you possibly cannot be doing that by just limiting your scope and limiting yourself to what is the as is. So I think we have been beneficiaries of being courageous at the face of adversity when everybody else is saying that you should not do something, but and it will be detrimental. And I think stewardship is that when we decided to make that choice, it's about assimilating all the views which are coming in from internal stakeholders and teams at that point of time, because it wasn't mindless. It was not it was not a whimsical action on our part at all. I think the outside world, for them it's visible what it is, but I think there's a lot of internal deliberation which happens. So we do put in mind what are the thoughts and what are the views of internal teams. What are the views even of those who are external but are well-wishers and stakeholders in the ecosystem? And hence, can we not just put our agenda before them? So it, of course, was a very difficult balancing game between what we thought was a bold move and side by side assimilating the views and thoughts and perspectives of the internal team members, and so that it became the outcome was far more qualified and measured than what it would have otherwise been. So for me, courage and stewardship can sometimes go in opposite direction. However, it is important for leaders to combine the two to ensure that the end result is measured and effective and is conducive to the future growth of the organization. So that's how we looked at managing the two elements of servant relationship.
Thank you. Quickly about what we're doing in L&T about leadership and succession planning, and to Ashok's question. I think L&T's approach to leadership, behavior, measurement, and assessment and development is very much from an engineer's lens. We've done 18,500 approximately assessments in the last 20 years. I think it's a world record, by doing development centers of 3 days, and we've put people through the churn. We have a set of competencies for senior people, such as strategic global mindset, inspiring results, synergistic customer management, and things like that, and including social intelligence. So many of these, by assessing them and by using them as subjects for development with the rigor of repeatedly doing it and not going flip-flop from year to year. When you're doing something for almost 20 years continuously, you're actually building a culture around those. And I do believe that the execution strength of L&T and the ability to find successors through this systematic way of assessing and developing is working pretty well. At the same time, we find sometimes that it may not be a perfect kind of a equation of 1:1 when we have to hire from outside. So it's a blend. I mean, sometimes we found that when you're growing very fast, at more than 20% CAGR in terms of revenues and so on, you can't just manage with internal employees, and you need to infuse talent from outside. But I think by and large, the wave after wave of GETs, the Build India scholarships, and the talent management programs that we have has kind of worked. And I think it continues to work. I'll now hand over to Maniji, who has lots of questions in the chat box. And Mani, please take over and please moderate. And if there are any questions for the two guests as well as me, I'm happy to take them.
All right, thank you very much. I think that was indeed very stimulating, and sincerely appreciate Rituparna and Ashok for your very frank expression of so many initiatives that you have taken in your organizations and how these could inspire others to pick up a few lessons. I have a lot of questions and I'll take them as they are coming in. One of the first questions that comes in is related to what you just said, Rituparna, that when we're talking about servant leadership, we need to seek opinion of people around us, 360 degree almost. Now, this is a culture which has to be created in an organization. So could you share some perspectives on how we do this effectively? Because giving feedback is not something people are comfortable with.
Right. I think when we are talking about organization structures itself undergoing change from the traditional boxes to a mechanism where we are becoming more networked and collaborative, I think it's important for one of the reasons we don't get feedback or we are not able to effectively channelize that engine is because we get so caught up in our org structures. We get so caught up in our roles, the designations, and so on and so forth, that we become distant from our people and our team members. So I think the most important element is that while we all have individual goals and responsibilities, but we have to make ourselves a team member first. So our persona, our self-identity should be that I am a team member. So which means I bring a certain set of skill sets and competency. However, I am insufficient. And I think it's very important that to feel and acknowledge that even if we are leaders, we are vulnerable in many ways. And we do need the teams and their expressions and views. So how do you go about doing that? How approachable are we with our team members? How much time are we spending with them in their discussions and forums? What is the tonality when we are doing a group discussions? Is the tonality authoritative and directional, or directive in, directional in directorial rather, sorry.
Dictatorial.
Dictatorial and essentially you are giving the directions and people are just supposed to be making notes. I think if we are just watchful about these, it's very much possible. And especially the new lot of employees and the younger generation, they are very vocal. So honestly, they don't need much of a trigger rather than an enabling collaborative environment to get them to open up and speak up. But you have to come down to their level, not intellectually, but I think spiritually, or we have to leave aside our roles and designations and be one of them. And when we are one of them, we will get ideas, suggestions, views which are honest, which are authentic, and which could be very useful for the organization.
Sure. Ashok, your take?
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to what Ritu was saying. I think those are fantastic journeys that, I think she's talking about, and these are cultural fabrics. About a couple of years back, I think about 2.5 years back, we did a diagnostic around this point that you make. How does one listen better? How does one value opinions better? How does one have a collaborative conversation, even a conversation? We coined a program which initially started as should we do it, but it caught so much of momentum. So if you go across Aditya Birla Group and say, what does CTC mean? You won't hear cost to company. You will hear conversations that count. So we created a program called Conversations That Count. And about 5,500 of my line managers, starting from the top, went through it. Because the very strong need we felt as employee surveys, conversations and so on, saying, hey, listen, my boss gives me feedback. He just lands on me. Even in regular conversations, I don't get a chance to get in my point of view. And when you go back to the leader and say, guys, why don't we just, why do we get this feedback? He said, no, I'm a very empowering leader. I'm a very open leader. I have become big, but look at my feedback. I'm very positive. Now listen, there is a thin line, because what happens in a conversation and meeting, we said, let's put all these conundrums into a puddle called a CTC. And we launched, it's a one-day kind of a format. It was what everybody saw, here is one more program. But it became a milestone for turning this work around. We said it's no more about you landing. It's not about having good appraisal conversation. It's about your attitude to conversations, attitude to listening, attitude to, are you willing to take feedback as much as give feedback? So most of the conversations today, when I do my appraisal, I end with saying feedback for me. And that's a conversation which counts. And we taught people how to, now taught is the wrong word, taught within quotes. But it's interesting how people have to be coming into a frame to say, hey, okay, I get your point now. And the employee warmth went up significantly. But this is a skill. It has to be practiced. It's a mindset translated into a skill. If I can say I am very visionary about feedback willingness, but I don't practice it, it doesn't help. So the mind and the skill have to connect. So I'm just adding to what Ritu said. That's an interesting experiment. Touching the lives of 44,000 people. We got a lot of good warmth coming back from employees saying, thank you for even thinking this is important. So this was, and this is a huge company, legacy run, and interestingly, services sometimes looks, we call it yuppier and more glamorous than the manufacturing sector, right? And we have a bit of both. It's interesting how many people thanked us from the services sector, saying, my boss is so arrogant that forget servant leadership or inclusion. He can't have a simple conversation with me. He doesn't care. So we got that big tick on, thanks for caring. Thanks for even listening to my need or my aspiration. So the quality of listening in the group went up. I just thought I'll share that with everybody as friends.
Very nice. Very nice.
Very nice. A challenge that leaders, sorry. A challenge.
I said people felt very valued.
I can imagine. And I think you've given us a new perspective on CTC, which people are going to remember and carry out of this room too. What we're also looking at is leaders often have the responsibility of productivity, loyalty with the teams that they're working with. Now, in a changing scenario where there are so much of gig employees, how do you ensure both of these happen comfortably?
Productivity and
This is
loyalty.
right into
Correct.
Ritu's stream. This is all about Ritu.
I think I actually feel that we should shift the expectation of loyalty these days to reliability. I guess loyalty is a nice to have, but I don't think in today's world it's an imperative for any organization. But reliability, yes, I think definitely that needs to be there. So essentially, how do we make the dance between productivity and reliability go hand in hand? I think it is, I personally feel that reliability in itself is insufficient as a criteria, but it is not contrary to an expectation of productivity. I think we can't choose between the two. We have to figure out a way by which we are investing in creating productivity, but we are also giving people, I feel reliability comes when we also give people the opportunity or room sometimes to make mistakes. So we can't hire perfect people. So we will have people around us who will make mistakes. So when they feel that there is no penalization for making mistakes, that's how reliability comes in. But once that kicks in, I think we also need to make sure that we are investing and we're encouraging our teams to make the self-investment to be always productive. I mean, it's very simple. I have this mechanism where I feel that where I actually judge myself, did I earn my daily bread? Because I feel that my employer or whoever is expecting from me today a little bit more than what I did yesterday. And have I been able to make that investment? And it's very important to, in our communication, also encourage our team members and our entire organization to value these two hand in hand. I don't think they go one against the other. So we need reliable teams, but we also need teams which are constantly investing in upgrading and building productivity. Productivity is not left to the individuals alone, which I think is a very important component of building productivity, but we also need to give them tools and platforms and guardrails, which helps them become more productive day by day. So yeah, I think that's my perspective.
Right, Ashok, like to add on?
I think that's captured well, Professor Mani. I do believe the element of productivity will always be there. I think newer forms of productivity are coming through. Newer forms of, how do you call it, org design, use of gig workforce, flexibilities are being built in for sure. Having said that, the imperative of success is very high. The need to need to make sure we know how to battle the next front is very, very right. I think so. Companies are becoming more porous, if I may call it that. So osmosis is clearly everybody is looking for action. People are more willing. Boundaries of the companies are open to inputs. Of course, loyalty is something which is loyalty as a measure of the spirit behind the company and not just tenure. Is valued. We highly value people who are highly committed to the subject of the company and its purpose. Battle the company. So it's easy to belong to a company which is doing well in good times and doing very well. Tough times call upon people to bring that loyalty to action. So loyalty in action is what I would say. It's like being at a battlefront, right? You're on training at good times, variable pay plans, this, that, etc. But in tough times, you must be able to stand up and get your loyalty to work. So I'd like to measure loyalty in terms of the impact and what Ritu calls the reliability and the impact you can have versus the I'm more loyal because I've stayed here longer kind of a tone. I think that definition is gone. It's more the impact you have.
I guess we are looking at...
Maniji, how many more questions do you have?
I have 5 more questions. Ritu has something to say.
May I suggest that, of course, after Ritu says, that you use the questions for each speaker rather than getting both perspectives so that we'll have adequate coverage.
Okay.
So I think one thing I thought we should call out, that when we talk about loyalty, what is loyalty for, towards? I think we should unpack loyalty to individuals from loyalty to the purpose of the organization. Sometimes these two gets muddled, and that leads to chaos within an organization. So I wanted to call that out.
I think also loyalty to a profession is getting more and more important with the neo gigs of the world, because you might be very loyal to the organization while you're working, but your profession comes in front.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think what we are hearing is it's more important to check what is your contribution while you're there than anything else. And that perhaps is going to be the new definition of loyalty as I'm beginning to understand.
Yeah.
We have Jagmohan Rishi here, who's a senior professional from the HR and learning space. He's from Wokhart, and he has a question for Ashok Ramchandran. Go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thanks for introduction and great talk. I had a question that, in today's era, we have multiple levels of, generations in the organization, Gen Y, Gen X, Gen Z. So how do we you engage multi-generational workforce spread across the globe? That's something I would like to understand from you, sir.
No, it's a great point, Jagmohan, because I think it is a point which has become more pronounced in all companies now. And I think no company can say that they have cracked the issue. I think there is a continuum to this issue. What we are sensing is, I think it has to be worked at two ends, and we are currently working on it. As Aditya Birla Group, we have our definite mix of intergenerational group. And like companies which have been in existence for some time, we have some people who've been here for 20 to 30 years of experience in the 45 to 55, 60 range. And then you have a whole host of people, the trainee population of the last 7 years, catching up quickly. And every batch is apparently getting brighter, and they are only getting more eager to say, give me the keys. So we call it the hurried arrival of the unprepared. And yet, how do I get the mix right? And we're working at it, Jagmohan, at two levels. One, how do I build the capacity to say, my youngsters, how do I have a phased model of development? And it's like a child. It's a developmental milestone. I can't water the plant if I haven't watered it at a sapling level daily. So making sure our leaders at a middle and senior level are accountable. And if today when Yogi says we have legions of trainees who are today running the company over these years, that's a tribute to the fact that the middle and senior management have invested in those training programs, which today are yielding middle management and senior management. And I think we are deeply embedded in that. 20% to 40%, many of my managers' accountability is for development of that 3 levels of people below. We hold them accountable for it. You might have hit your business results, but if you haven't hit your people development results, we will hold you down. If a trainee fails, I will hold you accountable, less the trainee. It's easy to look brave with a junior. I would like to look brave with a middle and a senior person. So holding accountability for development, recognizing great people developers is a big journey which I believe has to be done in every company. Equally, to the youngsters, we have these conversations with them around fireside chats to say that while you believe you can reinvent the world, while you believe you are here to completely change the whole landscape, respect the fact that these are people who have built the company. There is wisdom to draw upon. It's like a well. We don't want you to jump into the well and say, oh, you drowned me in this well of experience and wisdom. But you must draw on the well. And if you don't draw from that well, you will not learn from that well. So draw on the well. So there's a lot of reverse mentoring happening in the program, in the system, where people are learning from each other. To the senior people, we are starting to celebrate your ability to build depth in succession, your ability to hand over the keys to people, your ability to come and go into an advisory pattern while you give the reins to somebody. And I think that journey is starting to come. So the candle is burning on both sides. And this time it's not burning and shrinking. The candle is growing on both sides. And I do believe the two shall meet. More and more we are sensing, for example, interesting experiment. We said roles which we are needing in legacy large companies, sometimes experience is measured in terms of number of years. So you go to my CHRO or you go to my business leader, yaar ye role kaise karna hai? They'll say yaar minimum 20 years to chahiye mujhe experience. This is not like 5 kilos of potato, you know. So the question we are going back and saying, why do you need 20 years of experience? What does a year mean to you? What does competency mean? Now we have started giving the keys to people who are, by the manager's assessment, 8 years experience. Whereas I believe he's 80%, 70% ready for the role. So we are now changing the language, Jagmohan, to say not about number of years, not your seniority, your readiness quotient. So we did a 3-factor model on judging readiness. And if the 3-factor model means that at 8 years, I believe I'm ready, I will get the key. However, my boss, who's the senior and wisdomful guy, will ensure I'm a success because I will make mistakes. But as my boss, he holds an accountability. So every talent punt has an owner at the top. Either I'll celebrate you or I'll hold you accountable. One of it will happen. So developmental agenda, multi-pronged, with a layer of accountability. And I would call it the edge. The edge in the program gives you that accountability. I think people love it. People are starting to see the value of it now. In the initial days, people say, kya ho raha hai? Any change has a bout of resistance. And HR has had to demonstrate it by example. And I think after that, resistance goes down. I hope I've answered your question. And respect at the core. You know, senior people need to be respected. So we tell our young Turks, don't come back and laugh at this old guy who doesn't know anything, you know, this new age digital world. Take it easy. He wasn't born in the digital world, just as you weren't born in the world of competence. So learn from him, teach him. And I think that humility has to happen even with our youngsters. That's a journey, Jagmohan, to share with you. I don't think it's all sweet and honey, but there are days like that when it rains also.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Great answer for, developmental and accountability. And of course, another point is the reverse mentoring part also.
That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I just want to ask one question on that, Ashok, about acceptance of this younger person in the system, because acceptance can't be taught in conference rooms or in training rooms and so on. It's a cultural thing. I'm interested to hear from you about how you're dismantling those notions that experience and age and salt and pepper on the head is what really gives that person an edge.
Yeah, it's a journey, Yogi. Fantastic point. I think it is a journey. We are what is called soft launching some of these people before we give them the role. So we are really giving them mezzanine roles before they take on that role. So by giving them a mezzanine role, they get more exposure. They build a reputation for sampling. So it's a, as they say, we don't want to pour a bucket of shampoo on the head. I'll give you 4 sachets every day. So we are using a sachet pack approach for our top talent, saying we are sampling them in some of the key roles and showcasing that success, allowing people to recognize that a 7-year-old girl can easily run the industrial relations and manufacturing HR for a factory which has, say, 1,500 people. Yeah. And that this is the sachet pack of how she's demonstrated her ability to run it. And that I don't need a 24-year-old HR head who's today 50, nearing 50 to run that, because we feel there are 3 unions. Because we have sachet packed with her, showcased her experiences to say, hey, she's managed it. She's now having the credibility to manage even an environment which is typically male, large number of years of experience to manage. By sachet packing that, people are starting to open up. And to your point, many of our young engineers in the shop floors, male or female, gender neutral, are coming up to take on these larger roles. They go through a testing period for sure, like all of us did, I'm sure, when we were trainees and we entered the workplace. And they get a little cornered a little bit sometimes. But that's when the boss has to step in. Because for every early punt we take, it goes onto the goal sheet of the boss. So here I'm giving you X person who's going to head HR in this example. It could be a business shop floor, but the manager is held accountable. And I have regular reviews. I, as in me and my colleagues, have regular reviews with the manager to say, what kind of decisions is she succeeding in? What are her struggles? How have you helped? How many times have you met her? And I think that is yielding an ecosystem for us.
Very good.
And,
Thank you.
and the chances of success or failure are really equal. I mean, there's no major, if anything, she brings that extra josh to the table. She doesn't have the wisdom of sometimes some of the issues which have to come in. Hey, but that's what the senior is there for. That's what we are there for. That's what my gray hair is there for. I think it's flying. It's flying actually well. But it's a slow burn, boss. It's a project by project. I call each case a project because there is fair resistance. No, we'll all collapse. Company will shut down if you do this Ashok. Of course, that resistance is there. You got to create. I do believe if I have 100 examples, I'll stop creating a project. It'll become an ecosystem. Currently, I have smaller number than 100. Let me put it that way.
Thank you.
It's a journey.
Okay. Ritu, here's a question for you. In vulnerable times, people hesitate to take on leadership roles. What is your experience and how do you cope with such situations?
This is the perfect time, honestly, to take up a leadership role. I mean, this is the perfect time because the world has fewer leaders, essentially, when there is a crisis. In good times, and which Ashok and Mr. Sriram also alluded to, in good times, it's very easy to be a leader. Things are, you have high tide, and hence you don't really need to do much. You just have to ride the tide. But I guess if somebody is looking for an opportunity and somebody is looking for an opportunity to demonstrate themselves as a leader, I think this is the time to stick yourself out and pick up those roles and responsibilities. Yeah. And even if you are able to deliver, even if you are what you are delivering is probably not at par with what was expected in good times, I think you still will, just the show of character of having stood tall in the face of adversity goes a long way in terms of building your credibility within the organization. I think this is just the perfect time for one to not shy away from responsibilities, not shy away from taking on additional responsibilities, because you will be given a long rope when you pick up such difficult roles in adversity. So I think it's just the right time. You shouldn't shirk away from leadership in vulnerable times.
All right.
I just want to add on to one point, Professor Mani, to what Yogi mentioned a while back, which is, I think, a very important point which all organizations are coasting through, which is, how do you balance the development of internal leaders and how do you bring in some mix of external leaders? What's that mix? I think that is coming into question, because at one level you want to develop internal leaders, and we are finding two kinds of trends. Preparing the internal leaders to take internal talent punts seems at times a little harder than going out and getting people. It's a very odd thing, but there is sometimes more proof asked of the internal people than looking at external people. Now, this is a bit of a conundrum. Of course, we need external people to bring in some freshness, and that's right. But the shopping list of what people need to be ready for before I hand over the keys is very intense internally. So we are now trying to lighten that a little bit, saying if I have 3 conversations of 45 minutes each to land somebody from the outside world, why does it take us not enough courage, to Ritu's earlier point, to not land on somebody internally? And we are now asking a slightly proactive question, which is yielding some interesting results, which is, when the opportunity knocks, somebody looks at me and says, you're not ready for it. But I only wish somebody had told me this 1 year back or 2 years back, I would have prepared for that opportunity. So we're now asking people to stay accountable, to say, have you built the team which when opportunity knocks 2 years from now, 1 year from now, you'll be able to give it to the person. There's no bravery in saying you're not ready for it. And because at that moment, I feel completely dropped. So I think this accountability is a very sacred accountability. And I think that internal talent agenda has to bring this urgency in it. I just wanted to add on to that point, which just struck me when Ritu was speaking, and adding to what Yogi said earlier. That's all. And linking.
I wanted to share something interesting. I don't know if many of you are aware that Belgium has created a world record of being the country which has gone on without a leader or a government for the longest period of time. And Belgium has managed to beat its own record in the past by doing so. So essentially and you know why? And because I have friends in Europe and I've been like, I'm amazed that you guys can't find yourself a leader. Essentially, nobody wants to become a leader because during this phase. So I'm saying, imagine what an opportunity which is being wasted. I mean, if only one person is ready to stick their neck out and say, hey, I will become the leader, or give me that job, I will do it for you. It would have been remarkable. So this is just to showcase what happens.
Yeah, very interesting. We have RSR Murthy here with us, who is a former CFO at Madison and now a management consultant. Murthy sir, go ahead. You can ask your question and you can unmute and put on your video also.
Yeah, hello Ashok and Ritu. Thanks for a lot of insights. That was very interesting. But I have a much broader question in mind, going beyond organizations. Today, the fact remains that notwithstanding all the good stories we have about certain organizations and certain leaders, there are out there lot many other organizations which are faring poorly in terms of employee welfare or whatever other term that we would like to use for the human resource. And the fact remains that much of it is also because of the managers in action who are not those ideal leaders that we are really talking about in our conference. So my question is, how do we bring about a change in this? What actions do we need to take? And perhaps one good catchment area is the business schools. But some of these managers who fare poorly in terms of managing human resources are actually from even premier business schools. So given this, what kind of a change that should we bring in whatever sphere to make it, produce better leaders? That's my question. Seeking your views.
I'll take a shot at it, and then I'm sure other panelists can add value as well to this. I think it's a very important point to make. And sometimes when we speak in an hour and a half, it all looks like success. I think even large companies have many leaders who we struggle with. So at the outset, we must confess that it's not that any organization is a perfect place or it's all a picture of success. I think there are days when every company struggles with it. I want to share an experience which I was with Mr. Harsh Mariwala when he hosts what is called an entrepreneurship incubation forum. And he had invited us to speak on a forum like that to have a conversation. We met about 30 entrepreneurs, which are small scale, medium scale industries, who may not have a deep organizational capacity for too much of processes or investment and so on. And it was a very authentic, successful crowd of people, very successful people. Now, the challenges were exactly what you said. Most of them saying, how do I now create excellence in a workplace where I don't want to get into this whole frame of competency framework, leadership, methodologies, and all this rest of the masala which comes along sometimes in conversations. How do I, in an intuitive manner, get this done? Is there a way to do that? So I reckon we had a good conversation. I don't think there's a solution immediately like that, but it's not a formulaic solution. But it comes from, I think, three points, two of which you already covered. It comes from when the leader or the entrepreneur or the CEO of the business is forward-looking and willing to be open to this. So we had a conversation around openness of CEOs. And many of them said, I'm open, but I'm uneasy because I want to make sure the key decisions remain with me. There was a lot of frank conversation. So how does a leader transit to openness is a question number one we should maybe reflect on in another forum maybe. The second is, how do I make sure my leaders below me as CEO, middle management, whatever you call them, they are willing to do this. And that is possible only if I am willing to do that. And therefore, the two levels of leadership must come in. third, which is the question I posted for Professor Mani, which is how do we create youngsters, how do we create academic institutions to espouse this cause of two things. One, the leadership and followership as a concept, and second, confidence. Quite often, Murthy, my experience has been a system needs confidence. My leader must allow me to be confident, and I must carry a shred of confidence to take and come up and say the right things. If I lack confidence, my best of ideas will die with me. And if my leader doesn't give me that space and confidence, he'll not get the best out of me. So it teams a two-way street, but it takes three players: the CEO, the entrants who are coming through the company, and the classical middle management with whom the company is experienced. And I think it's a three-way process. If you approach it without three-way, it won't happen. So that's my approach to it. I don't think it's a formula, but it's my approach to share. I don't know if I've answered your thought.
No, thank
Murthy,
you
but
very much.
you will have
Thank
your
you,
own thought.
Ashok.
Ritu,
Thank you,
can add
It's a
Ashok.
very real.
Yeah, I think one of the things which I feel is we need to first demonstrate that leadership is a verb and not a noun. I think it's not that leaders are, it's not immaculate conception. So essentially, it's a series of demonstrated behavior is what makes a leader a leader. It is not based on your name tag. That's one. Secondly, I think many organizations end up making mistake of promoting individual high performers into becoming leaders. So it's like an implicit expectation that I am a high performer and hence I have already made my case to become a leader. I think there is a journey to be traveled between being a high performer, individual high performer, to becoming a leader. And I'm talking about leadership at all levels from that perspective. And the third thing is that maybe it's important for us also to ask the questions to our team members between what's the objective in life. Many people want a secure job and they want to make more money. That essentially also is not a prerequisite to becoming a leader. Just because you've been doing a good job in the realm, do you really want to take more responsibilities? And do you have the ability to take more responsibilities? I think it's very important for organizations to actually be very careful about how we appoint and designate leaders. Most of us get that wrong. And of course, Mr. Sriram, Ashok, they are part of very large organizations. I mean, very large organizations. But, and hence they would have much more depth. But from the small organization that I operate, I have realized that these are some very basic challenges. Until and unless we are honest answering these questions, we won't be able to create good leaders.
Thank you,
I
Ritu.
would even recommend to Professor Mani that at some time, if BMA has an appetite, having a wider conversation of enabling our SME industries will be fantastic, because entrepreneurs form the backbone of any economy. And I think there is a whole body of work which is possible. And I think BMA could, subject to appetite, and I don't know if it's allowed, etc. I don't know that. I just thought I'd leave you with that suggestion.
So, no, it's absolutely doable, and your point is noted. BMA does have a lot of forums where we interact with SMEs, but now getting them on the digital platform is becoming actually easier because we have all the geographical barriers. So I certainly keep this in mind and initiate this action in time to come. I have one concluding question. This is for the three of you. And Yogi is also welcome to give his inputs. While we all understand the essence and the philosophy of servant leadership, and perhaps a lot of leaders have begun to put it into practice, the whole concept seems very unglamorous when you use the word servant leadership. Would you, based on your experience, give it another nice title? Well, we're just trying, don't worry.
Should I start?
We're trying. Yeah, go ahead. Yogi, for whatever reason you're
The
in.
phrase servant leadership does not
Okay.
mean servitude. It does not mean being servile. Servant leadership is inverting the pyramid. Servant leadership is respecting your followers, empowering them, holding them accountable to the extent that you're drawing boundaries to give them confidence, not dismissing what they're saying with hubris, being humble. Servant leadership is focusing more on the follower and using the follower as a potent vehicle for change and achievement. Servant leadership is about stewardship, where you put the organization first, and in that process, don't serve your own selfish leadership needs of being the supremo or the alpha, who everybody should sort of stand up and papers fly, etc. when you walk into the room. So words like charisma, words like great man theory, words like person who has a magnetic personality, and also experiences of certain companies which have possibly suffered because of arrogance, give way to the kind of leadership where there is a quietness, there is empathy, there is a Satya Nadella out there who's leading a huge giant into new vistas. That is what I think are examples of servant leadership.
Okay. Ashok and Ritu.
That's covered very well. So I don't think I have another word for it, but I would simply say leadership is co-create. Leadership which co-creates. And for me, the original concept of trusteeship has followership embedded in it, has a servant leadership embedded in it, where I'm not the boss of what I sit on today, that I'm a trustee as a concept. So it's up to me to bring the best out of my teams for a common good. And I shall hand over the baton to a better leader who might today be working below me. But if he's a better leader for that context, I become his reportee. And I think if that ability to think trusteeship in the head and co-create, these two could be good checks for ego. The ego which doesn't allow me to do these two. I think these two are good reins on the ego.
That's a very valuable point, because there's an author called Dana Zohar who writes about trusteeship and servant leadership. So you're bang on exactly with the kind of foundations of servant leadership.
Yeah.
Ritu, concluding remark.
I think I was on the point of servant leadership. I was curious and I was trying to learn more. And I was looking for examples out there of servant leaders, and the names that popped up itself tells me that I don't think we really need to do much changes in the name of it, like Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Teresa. These are the names, by the way, out there which demonstrate servant leadership. But I think essentially what it means to me is the difference between amanat and jagir. I think as leaders, the job at hand, do we treat that as our amanat or we treat that as a jagir? Essentially is the essence of the servant leadership. A servant leader treats it as an amanat and not as a jagir. So that's my little understanding of the concept of servant leadership.
Very nice.
All right, that's wonderfully summarized. And as we always say, sometimes we need to pause, because we believe good things will always keep coming if you have the inclination. Thank you very much, Ritu and Ashok and Yogi, for this wonderful orchestrating of a learning journey that we have continued over the last 6 weeks, and look forward to every Saturday, as many of the people in this Zoom meeting agree. As usual, let's have the pleasure of having a group photograph together with all of us who are here this evening. And while we get ready for the group photograph, may I request Shri Indrapal Singh Ji, our past president and a very senior professional who's retired from Godrej, to make a brief wrap up and also propose a formal vote of thanks from BMA.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was a surprise. But thank you, Yogi, Rituparna, and Mr. Ramachandran for wonderful session. I think you threw definitely different perspectives on servant leadership and how this process of managing change is happening in the new age organization like Team Lease and legacy companies like Aditya Birla Group and L&T, and various questions that you answered very, very beautifully. I think it probably deserves a longer session. We were talking at one point about driving innovation. So I'm reminded of one story, actually not story, but a fact. In my company, Mr. N.P. Godrej, our founder, used to go around plant after plant, workstation after workstation, asking only one question, Aje Navu Su Kidu, about innovation. He would ask every workman, which means in Gujarati, what new you have done today. And that's his way of driving innovation. So he was a Gandhian, incidentally, and he felt that he learned more about what's happening in the plant by talking directly to the workmen rather than having any presentation and talking to the plant managers. And he was on the dot all the time. So I suppose these kind of things may not happen today. People may not walking around the plant, diligently day in and day out and talking to people. But I suppose the 21st century leadership that we spoke about today, various concepts shared, are really the way forward. And I suppose the individual character of a leader, his humility, his willingness to listen to people, this concept of trusteeship, are all going to be very, very helpful in creating very meaningful societies for all human beings to live happily. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And can we have your best smiles to capture this moment so that we can share with you after the event through our social media pages of BMA, and also, of course, you will get your copy of the picture while we get ready with our best smiles. And thank you, Indrapalji, for reminding us October 2nd, we have a special Gandhi Jayanti event as part of the BMA celebrations. We have two stalwarts who will be speaking to us. The first is Tushar Gandhi, the great grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, who is going to talk to us on lessons from Bapu. And the second session that follows will be a treatise on Vedanta by the international scholar Srimati Jaya Rao. So please keep 2nd of October free for us so that you can be part of this learning activity that BMA has initiated after the lockdown began in April. Week after week, we get together to celebrate learning. Lakshmi and Supriya from the BMA Secretariat team are in the meantime capturing your best smiles. Please have a little bit of digital patience. We are across 3 screens, so you will come across your image sooner or later. Please put on your video so that we only don't capture your name by mistake.
And I just want to, while waiting in closure, just want to say thank you to Professor Mani and Yogi and BMA.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you, Ritu.
Great event, great conversations. Enjoyed the conversations, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. And you'll have to wait for the ATC clearance to log out.
It's done.
Okay, so that's it's done is where we are.
Okay, very good.
All right.
Have
Thank
a
you
nice
very much.
weekend, everybody. Be safe. Be safe.
Stay safe indeed. Take
All
care.
the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.